Good evening, everyone. It's your friendly neighborhood Darth Bobcat here, still looking for a way to introduce himself besides saying ya boy. This is my review of Mr. Crypt number 2, aka Mr. Crypt Meets Vampires, brought to you by our good friends at Alterna Comics, as you can see from this wonderful 90s throwback here. In fact, this comic book is a throwback in a lot of ways, all positive. I've thought for a while that one of the big issues that American comic books have compared to their Japanese counterparts is a lack of series that you can just throw at somebody and they can pick it up and not have to have a bunch of baggage. Now, of course, you have your indies that can do that, but you don't have necessarily a lot that's super kid friendly. Like, I can't think of the last Marvel or DC book I picked up where I could, in good conscience, hand it over to, say, a 5-year-old. Speaking of, in case you're wondering why I'm reviewing number 2 instead of number 1, I picked up all 3 available issues of Mr. Crypt from the Etsy store of Alterna Comics, but I decided to give issue number 1 away to my cousin's 5-year-old son because he likes comic books and spooky things. So I said, "Hey, this is perfect." Especially for a $1.50, being the best second cousin ever is a really low asking price. So let's talk a little bit about the newsprint. The newsprint is oddly nostalgic. You can get a little bit of bleed through on the color between panels, and you get some what I call printing artifacts here. I think it's, you can say, here you have this sort of ray pattern here. You turn over to the next page, and there's that there. I can kind of see why bigger companies like Marvel and DC switched over to the glossy paper. On the flip side, at least for me, this is giving me a huge nostalgia trip because it reminds me of the types of paper and comics I would see when I was a kid. Now, specifically, the biggest comparison I would make of this to another series is Casper the Friendly Ghost. Because Mr. Crypt here is a well-meaning, spooky guy who keeps getting into trouble and has to work his way out. It's a bit like a action Casper the Friendly Ghost. I decided to review number 2 here because it was my favorite of the bunch. Because I love the setup here. Mr. Crypt is a living skeleton whose grave was struck by lightning, and he has to live in the town in disguise. Now, that's the best disguise ever, right? Mustache, top hat and coat with no pants. Yeah, everyone just thinks he's human. Issue number 1, I felt like they did a few too many jokes about his mustache flying off and people realizing he was a skeleton. This time around, they avoided that. This time we got a really good setup here, which is a classic liar revealed type thing, where he works at a library. Vampire hunter comes in and says, "Oh, I've been hearing about the skeleton terrorizing the town along with these vampires." And, oh, why are you so familiar with the undead section? He asks Mr. Crypt, and Mr. Crypt goes, "Oh, I'm totally a vampire hunter." Yeah, that's it. And this is kind of the innocence of the story, is that the vampire hunter immediately believes him without any evidence. And you set up how he's going to fight the vampires, which does not involve a stake. This bit was cute. This comic is just very cute overall. And so it's basically him figuring out how he's going to fight the vampires. He goes to look for the vampires. We have a fourth wall breaky joke where somebody told me that this was like a Patreon thing to give $100 and you can be in the comic. This guy looks like sort of a typical comic book fan. It makes a nice fourth wall breaky joke. There's a little bit of action. He has to fight the vampires. I really dig this art. It's the type of thing where I would buy it as it's kind of a timeless cartoony, is how I would put it. It's the type of thing you might see in the 90s for a Harvey comic book like Casper the Friendly Ghost. I could also see it being used by, say, Marvel or DC for a gag book. I'm just saying this is going to age well. 20 years from now, you could hand this off to a kid and you'd get the same basic good results. I would say that if I had one thing in this comic I didn't care for as much, and this is like, man in his 30s versus little kid reading it. The rat here, Mr. Barron, he's presented as being funnier than I think he actually is. But again, if I'm a little kid, I'm going to like, oh, look at the cute rat. He's so silly. The rest of it actually stands up pretty well for an adult just because, again, good lie reveal plot. How did I get wrapped up in this? All I'm saying is that Amazon or Hulu or whoever, you need to get the rights to this and make a animated series. It'll do really well. Let's see here. Troy Vivacis, good script. Alexander Jovic, I really dig your art. I'm going to see if I can follow you on Twitter or Tumblr or wherever you're at, because I want to see more stuff from you. And thank you both for an enjoyable comic book for a very reasonable price. Speaking of, it's worth your while. It's funny, I was actually just going to review this anyway, but then I was going through the packaging, and the good folks at Alterna will give you a 20% off coupon on your next purchase if you post a photo or video of your comic and put it up on social media. Which, wait a minute. Oh my god. This is a paid review now, indirectly. I have to worry about the ethical implications. Whatever will I do? No. I just wanted to tell about this fun, silly comic book. Now I have to think, was my review poisoned by the knowledge that I'll get 20% off my next review? I'll have to think about this. And you all have a great night while I have my ethical quandary. Take care.